Welcome to the Rotary Club of York. We are a people of action committed to service above self and honoring the four-way test. If you haven't already done so, please take a moment to silence your cell phones. Steve Feldman will lead us in our opening song, America, My Country 'Tis of Thee, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Michael Reichman will offer the invocation, and Martin Fedorko will introduce our visitors.
So please join me. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land of thy fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside, let freedom ring. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. Please prepare yourself in whatever way you are comfortable for meditation, prayer. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. What do these terms mean? They become buzzwords that, for some, have lost all meaning. You may hear DEI and your mind turns off thinking it's all hippy-dippy stuff used to marginalize me or make me feel uncomfortable. Can't we just move on? Well, no, you can't. Because this triumvirate of words, diversity, equity, inclusion, is missing one: acceptance. Because no matter your opinions on DEI, acceptance of the status quo is not an option. Acceptance of ignoring is not an option. Heck, we don't even have to agree with any particular means or ends when it comes to DEI. But acceptance to hear what others are saying, to listen with open hearts and open minds, to accept we can all learn something more from each other than what we had been before. Amen.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. I am pleased to have the honor of introducing our guests for today's meeting. When I call your name, please stand and remain standing until President Jackie has welcomed you. Jamil Alexander, guest of Jules Tolbert. Jamil, happy birthday, sir. Juanita Baxter, guest of Ann Druck. Jude Ihe-Jerica, guest of Walt Tilley. Jocelyn Kearse, guest of Jonah Geller. Mark Kearse, guest of President Jackie Summers. John Langle, guest of Austin Schenck. Demetra Middleton, guest of Ann Druck. Liz Morales, guest of Jules Tolbert. Chase Summers, guest of President Jackie and past President Mike Summers. And Jolene Tolbert and Mia Johnson, both guests of Jules Tolbert.
It is wonderful to see all of you here today. Thank you for joining us. It's a special treat to see you, and special that it's Jamil's birthday. Happy birthday again, Jamil. We know that you're going to find this program to be incredibly informative, and we hope that you plan to come back often and join us at the Rotary Club of York. Members, can you please help me welcome our visitors? President-elect Glenn Miller is representing our club at the Rotary International Convention in Houston, Texas. He is joined by thousands of Rotarians from around the world, and we happen to have a picture of him with none other than the Rotary International President, Shekhar Mehta. He said, "Timing is everything." The CEF Board of Directors will meet today at 1:30 downstairs in the Mixed Grill. The Board of Directors for Rotary will meet tomorrow, June 9th at 8 a.m. via Zoom. The Fellowship Committee invites you to 3 upcoming events. A networking opportunity on June 10th from noon to 1 at York Water Company's Brillhart Pumping Station, which will include a tour and lunch. A networking opportunity on June 15th from 6 to 8 for a walking tour of Lebanon Cemetery. And then a night out at the Revs with our friends from the Lancaster Rotary Club as the Revs take on the Barnstormers on June 22nd. As of today, I think we only have about 7 people who have signed up so far. I did hear on my way here today that the district governor nominee, Fred Gellert, who's also in Houston at that convention, is planning to join us, which is really lovely. And so he'll be here that night. Okay, that puts us at 8. We cannot have 8 people against all of these, not against, with all of these people across the river from the Lancaster Club. We plan to do this again next year at Clipper Magazine Stadium when the Revs play the Barnstormers again. So please, please consider coming out on the 22nd for that game. We have great seats behind home plate, and it'll all be a catered meal. So please, please plan on joining us. We'd love to have a good showing from our club. The Educational Vocational Committee is seeking volunteers to help kids learn to fish at Kiwanis Lake on July 3rd, August 6th, and August 13th from 8:30 to 11. For more details and to sign up, please reach out to Ashley Esweiler. A special congratulations to Michael Lowe, as he is the CEO of York Area Regional Charter School, and this is the very first graduating class since the school's inception. Is Michael here? Well, when you see him, wish him well from all of us. Let's give him a virtual round of applause. We hear good news about Bob Davis, who recently passed, President Bob Davis, who recently had hip replacement surgery. He is doing circles, doing laps around the wing, and they're going to probably release him soon. I think he just had surgery, I'm going to say yesterday. So he's a tough guy. He's doing really, really well, and appreciate your good wishes. Also, we hear that Jan Wogelmuth's health is slowly improving, and I know his family appreciates your continued prayers and well wishes as well. Our colleagues from York North Rotary will be hosting a summer festival at Peoples Bank Park on June 11th from 12 to 4 to raise funds to support Math is a Superpower, a program of the York County Literacy Council. The festival will feature live music, food, wine, beer, spirits, small games of chance, and more. So for more information, you can visit yorkrotarynorth.org. In a show of team spirit, I, who am in the 4th quarter of my term, and President-elect Glenn Miller, who is just about to reach kickoff on his term, are making a collaborative push to get our club across the 300 line, or the 300 member mark. To get to that mark, we need to have open tryouts, inviting a number of free agents to camp. Camp, of course, being our weekly meetings. We're reaching out to all of you as our team of scouts. As scouts, we're looking for each and every one of you to bring a free agent to our tryouts, all with the goal of building a team that has been put together to score a touchdown, reaching that 300 member mark. While tryouts are ongoing the next 2 months, we're going to do something to give you an incentive. So you, of course, have noticed the football references in this plea. So as an incentive, each member that brings a guest during the remainder of the month of June and during the entire month of July will be entered into a drawing. The prize is a pair of tickets to your choice of a Philadelphia Eagles home game, a Baltimore Ravens home game, or a Penn State home game. Tickets have been generously donated by Fox 43. And so if there are those of you who are more interested in baseball, the other option is tickets to all home World Series games this year, but only if the Orioles or the Phillies are in it. Something to wish for. All right. And now, it is my privilege to do our member moment and also a special recognition. Jules Tolbert is a servant leader who is quiet and thoughtful, but a force in moving the needle for the better in our community. Jules is originally from Atlanta, Georgia. His family hails from Macon. He attended Princeton University and at graduation was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Air Force. Jules was a bomber pilot who flew B-52s and B-2 stealth bombers. During the Cold War, one of his assignments was to sit nuclear alert in an alert facility ready to engage. At the end of the Cold War, bombers were taken off immediate alert status, and not long after, B-52s were sent to Iraq. He flew missions out of England and fought in Desert Storm. The combat debut for the B-2 stealth bombers was in 1999. He flew home from England to Missouri so he could turn around to fly a 24-hour combat mission in Kosovo. Service to country runs deep with Jules, as his grandfather was a physician in World War II and his father was in the National Guard. The first Top Gun movie was released at the start of his pilot training, which he found to be very inspirational. Jules later became a strategist, spending 10 years in Washington, primarily in the Pentagon. In his last tour, he taught strategy at the National Defense University in DC. While he could have stayed in the national security arena, he decided to retire after 28 years at the rank of colonel. And he and his wife, Jolene, made the move to York, where he became Chief Operating Officer for York Container Company and ultimately retired as president. As many of you know, past President and District Governor Charlie Wolf and Reuben Willman started the company. Rotary also runs deep, as Jules' father-in-law, Dennis Willman, was a member of our club for 40 years, and Jules' grandfather was president of the Rotary Club in Macon, Georgia. Past President Bob Davis proposed Jules for Rotary membership in 2015. He says that he greatly appreciates connecting with leaders each week and enjoys the opportunity to introduce people to Rotary. He's active on many boards, including YCEA and the United Way, where he co-chairs the DEI committee. He's chair of Downtown Inc. and chair of the Braided River Collective. He met Jolene when she was in grad school at the University of Georgia while he was visiting his cousin, who happened to be her roommate. They'd been married for 30 years and have moved 13 times with the military. Their daughter teaches in Falls Church, Virginia, and their son is completing his PhD in polymer science engineering at Lehigh. He and Jolene love travel, cooking, and eating, and have often combined them in their trips to Italy with Caputo brothers and to Paris on a bread tour. One of the core values of the Air Force is service before self. And as a Rotary core value, he has traded service to the nation for service to the community. Jules has been instrumental in the development of Rotary's IDEA Committee, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility, and is considered one of the most influential members of the committee. He's provided resources from the United Way 21-Day Equity Challenge to serve as the foundation for the Library of Reference Materials on DEI-related matters. And he's immersed himself in community and philanthropic initiatives that benefit those marginalized in our community. He embodies the core values of Rotary and the four-way test. This year alone, he has proposed 4 new members to our club and is in the process of proposing others, all 4 of whom are already very active. Jules Tolbert, it is my honor to present you with the President's Citation for Service Above Self and for your deep commitment to advancing our efforts in building membership reflective of our community. Please come forward to accept this award. Well, that was a surprise to Jules, if you may not have already guessed that. I'm so pleased we were able to do that. Thank you. Thank you for helping me make that happen. And well deserved, Jules. Thank you for all you do for Rotary. And now, this is just a red letter day. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Bill Hartman, who has a special Paul Harris Fellow presentation.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. Today we have another wonderful example of OTRs, outstanding true Rotarians, using the recognition points they've earned by donating to the Rotary Foundation. They're using these recognition points to award a Paul Harris Fellowship to a very deserving individual. What's unique about this is that this is a collaboration. This is 2 OTRs going together to pool their recognition points to give this recognition to a well-deserving individual. And the well-deserving individual has parents who are OTRs. And those parents are past President Mike Summers and current President Jackie Summers. And Chase Summers is the recipient of the Paul Harris Fellowship. And Chase, your parents have set a great example for you.
I just have to share that I didn't know that Chase was going to be able to do this. We've been planning to do this for both of our children, and it's difficult to get them in the state. So he happened to be home for an oral surgeon follow-up appointment. And so apparently he didn't know this, but Mike and Lynn were hatching a plan to see if we could get him here. This morning he says to me, I said, can you come? This would be great. I find this out last night as I'm looking at the updates on the agenda. And he says to me this morning, you know, I only have flip-flops. That's all I brought home. So take a notice of his really cool new shoes. On his way here, he stopped at Joseph Banks and evidently they had what he needed. You look good, Chase. That's great. So well-deserved. Thank you for being here and making the trip. And now President-elect nominee Aaron Jacobs with the membership committee update.
Thank you, President Jackie, and hello, Rotarians. Last week, I professed to be a great magician, and I intend to bring more of that magic to the Rotary Club today. I will not be making you smash bottles against your head, but no, today I will read your thoughts. So, for example, I can look at Bill Hartman and say, I know what he's thinking. Sir, you're no magician, but you're certainly quite a clown. But that's not the magic I'm talking about today. I'm talking about the magic of what is going to be our new mentor program. And what is this I'm talking about? I'm talking about members engaging new talent of Rotary. And now I'm reading your thoughts and you're saying, holy thunder, that sounds amazing. Rewind that. I want to hear it again. Watch this. Members engaging new talent of Rotary, the mentor program for Rotary. What is this? Well, allow me to read a slide to you. To create a welcoming and engaging experience for new members, Jules, thank you, of the York Rotary Club to increase member satisfaction, retention, and participation. This will assist members with learning how and why we do things, meeting other club members, becoming active on our committees, participation in club activities, and why not have them invite other people to become Rotarians? How does this work? Because you're thinking, this sounds cool, but can this work? And yes, it can. It's easy. What we're asking is people to become mentors, that would be you, and to be assigned a mentor cell group. This is a group of 3 people that new members will on a monthly basis rotate through. The member will spend a month with each mentor. And during that time, we ask you to just kind of meet with them outside of the club and get to know them. Sit with them during the weekly meetings, introduce them to people at your table and other Rotarians that you know, and have them come to one of the committees you participate on to get them to see what happens in between the programs. So before I read this list, I take you down to the bottom where I'm saying these are not requirements. These are desires. So don't think these things preclude you. An ideal mentor, someone who has 2 or more years of experience. Now you may say, I've only been here a year. That's fine. Let's talk. It could be a high rate of attendance at the weekly meeting. And now I'm reading your thoughts again. You're thinking, oh my gosh, I think he's talking about me. Why, yes, I am. In fact, active on a Rotary committee. And you think that sounds like me too. Interest in the success of new members, and can commit to 3 months of a cycle within a mentor cell group. Now, if I could wave my magic wand and induce my hypnotic powers, I would have at least 12 of you come up today and say, yes, I want to be a member. This sounds like me. But in the meantime, introduce yourself and your willingness to participate to myself or Chris Top. We're setting up this program. Our goal is to get it in place this summer so we can bring some of that Rotary magic to the club. Thank you.
I I have to say this idea really stems from the great work of the Idea Committee in talking about courageous conversations and how do members feel when they become a member of our club, and do they feel welcome? Do they feel like they're a part of it? And this is an effort to really help them feel engaged and to help them want to get more actively involved and meet everyone that they can within the club. So we have great hopes for the success of this program. We're absolutely certain it's going to be well received and something we'll continue to do for a long time. So thank you for presenting that, Aaron and Chris. And now it is my pleasure to introduce this very dashing and my favorite past president, Mike Summers, to introduce our program.
It's the Summers Day, I guess. I'm here, though, to introduce our speaker, who is a force of nature. I had wonderful conversation with CJ, and he talked about his idea as far as a program, and I got very excited about it. So we worked that out, and here we go. Our speaker is fellow Rotarian Christopher CJ Gross, who is a TEDx speaker and the founder and chief executive officer of Ascension Worldwide, based in Washington, D.C. area. Ascension Worldwide is a global consulting firm committed to helping clients achieve workplace inclusion, employee and client diversity, and innovative growth opportunities. CJ has over 20 years of experience as an international organizational development consultant, specializing in leadership development and diversity inclusion strategies and initiatives. CJ has consulted with domestic and international companies, including the U.S. Postal Service, Toyota, Oracle, Washington Post, Morgan Stanley, Loyola University, Howard University, Penn State, and DC Metropolitan Police Department, just to name a few. He's also served as a diversity, equity, and inclusion master faculty for the University of Maryland and the adjunct faculty for the Community College of Baltimore County. CJ started his career as a mechanical designer at General Electric, where he created layout, mechanical designs, and run calculations. At GE, he learned how effective companies run and the importance of employee relationship to the company's success. CJ has developed the unique ability to uncover and resolve social issues that hinder employee performance and efficiencies. He's also the author of a book, What's Your Zip Code Story? Understanding and Overcoming Class Bias in the Workplace. CJ received a BA degree in organizational management from Ashford University through the Forbes Entrepreneurship Scholarship. And CJ will discuss some of the findings through his consulting practice, along with the brain science behind bias and how it comes into play with diversity, equity, and inclusion, and its implication on business initiatives. Fellow Rotarians and guests, please warmly welcome the founder, the CEO of Ascension Worldwide, CJ Gross.
All right, thank you, Mike, so much for having me today. How are you today, fellow Rotarians? I'll ask again, how are you today? Great. Someone said great. Who said great? Okay, that's where my attention is going, right? So is anyone excited about this topic, right? Anyone? Oh, okay, right. So we're going to talk about bias and the brain science behind it, but more so the business case as well, right? So I've worked with clients over the last 20 years in different industries. And one of the things I found out was that when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and any of the other topics that go along with that, the initiatives fail when we don't connect it to the business case. And the conversations fail when we don't understand the brain science behind it, right? So this is what we're going to talk about. So two things you need to know about me. One is that we've already talked about it in my bio, is my background is engineering. I also have a black belt in Six Sigma, and I know karate. So you're safe with me here, okay? So let's take a dive into the why is this important to you and your business and your leadership. So what we find is there's two articles. One is a Harvard Business Review, and it talks about companies who have 2D diversity have all of these great things going for them. The one I wanted to point out, which is really eye-opening, is that companies who have 2D, which I'll explain momentarily, have 52% more likeliness to understand a client's needs based on their diverse clients. Now, what does it mean to have 2D diversity? So leaders in your organizations and your companies, including you, have 2D diversity. The question is, how diverse is it? So the first part of the diversity is your background, your experience. Oh, let me start my clock. I forgot. I'm sorry. So you have to tell me when it's. So your background. So if you, I'm an African-American man and I grew up in a specific area in the world, that's part of my diversity. That is my inherent diversity. There is the acquired diversity that all of us have the opportunity to expand, which is the things that you learn or things that you acquire by your experiences around people, places, and things. So that includes learning a new language. Anyone here speak Spanish? Un poquito español? So that's all I really know. So learning a new language would increase your 1D in diversity. Traveling to a different country or experiencing a different culture would also include expanding your diversity, right? And so this is not hard to understand when you think about how companies increase their market share. I was talking to Aaron right before my presentation, and I worked for a, it was, what kind of company? Was it insurance company? And the insurance company was trying to figure out how to expand market reach. So what they did was they realized that they didn't have any much market share in the Latina market, and they hired one person who was identified with being Latina, and their market share grew 225% in a matter of months. Oh, she got paid and they got paid, right? So the thought was when we go into the brain sciences will make more sense. When we have a diverse workforce, then they can relate to our client, right? Now, this other article by Inc. magazine talks about how companies for the last 32 years have been falling off the Fortune 500 list. And so the reason this is the case is because when you have a diverse pool of people working in your company and organization, you're more likely to be able to innovate. We'll talk about why that happens when we talk about the brain science. And with innovation comes growth, comes new products and services, and also increases market share. And so this is kind of scary, right? So if you think about the Fords of the world, the Gs of the world, those companies have fallen from the Fortune 500 in the last several years. I mean, really going back 10 or 15 years. So the average stay on the Fortune 500 list, the S&P 500 list, was 33 years. So if you look out to almost now, 2026, they're suggesting that companies will only stay on that list for 14 years. When you look at the article, the reason why is because a lack of innovation. Innovation is correlated directly with diversity. Diversity is correlated with people who think different, look different, come from different parts of the world, work differently within organizations and companies. Okay, so what happens when exclusion, or what is the cost of exclusion in our companies, organizations, including even at Rotary, right? And so a company called BetterUp did research, and they showed that in a Forbes article that companies who are inclusive or exclusive, who are exclusive, actually have more people that would experience sick days, right? And you have two types of sick days. You know, I think everyone knows. It's when you're really sick, and then it's when you just don't want to go to work. So what they find is that cost companies on average $2.5 million per 10,000 employees. And this second one is really dangerous, right? So it's when employees do not feel included, they're more likely to have a lag in performance, right? Costing companies on average $52 million per 10,000 employees. Now, we've all seen this or been this person. I call these people retired on the job. They come to work, they're not excited. They give you only what you ask for, right? So they're not really thinking about ways to innovate the company and all those other things, right? Now, here's what happens. People who are inclusive and want to be creative in the marketplace and value themselves, those are not the people that stay in the company. They leave the company. And where do you think they go? to their competition, to your competition, and they grow the competition organizational knowledge with the knowledge that you provided for your employees, if not inclusive. And so last thing is turnover, right? So that's, the point that I'm making around turnover is that companies on average, based on SHRM, Society for Human Resource Management, says that 30% of an employee's salary is required to retrain the next employee. So when I did work with Comcast, it was 50%. So every time you lose an employee, you're paying up to 50% of the revenue for their package, their employee package, or their income. And so a case in point, I want to mention, what does this actually look like? Because when we talk to leaders and companies, they say, okay, those numbers are cool and interesting, but what actually have you seen in the marketplace? Well, I worked with an engineering firm up in Canada, and they were actually an oil and gas company up in Fort McMurray. Anyone know where that is? It's called the Tundra, it's way up there. And so one of the things that they found was that they were looking to increase their innovation within the organization. They brought me in, we did a 6-week coaching program. At the end of the 6 weeks, we asked them to innovate, right? Come up with a new idea, service, product for your organization. And guess what we got? Nothing. No one wanted to innovate. No one wanted to share information. And we realized is that there was a lack of trust. So what we did was what any good consultant would do. We offered them money. And even when we offered them money, only 2 people submitted an idea. Out of those 2 ideas, one idea made it all the way up to the president of the company. And at the last day, when we're giving them certificates, he walks in and he says, we're going to implement this new idea. Now, me with the background in engineering, I said, don't you want to do a feasibility study and see if it's going to work? He says, no, we're going to save $180,000 on roughly every 18 months for this one idea. And this had to do with these cranes that pulled natural resources out of these cargo holes. And they would go down every 18 months, costing the company $180,000. And you multiply that by 12. So when you look at how we innovate, it's directly through different perspectives and different ideas and the trust in organizations to share those ideas. So I walked up to him and I said, hey, this is great, awesome job. How long have you been sitting on this idea? He said, for 2 years. I've been sitting on this idea for 2 years. I said, why so long? He said, because people like me, who it was a family-owned company, or it started out that way. He said, if you don't have the owner's last name, or you're not married into the family, or if you don't have this, this, and that, then you're probably one of the people who are not going to be heard from. So I said, you've been sitting on this idea for 2 years. And I looked at and I multiplied the amount of people that were in the room. And I multiplied the amount of money that they were saving. This is the challenge when we look at diversity, equity, inclusion only as the right thing to do. We need to look at it as a business case as well. Yes, we should do it because it's the right thing to do, but we should look at it as it is the thing that should be done in order for us to grow market share, to grow talent, and to have a unique competitive edge. Anybody remember what happened to, not what happened to, anybody remember Blockbusters? What happened to them? Where are they, let's just say? Oregon, is it Oregon? They're like one left now, right? Yeah, in museums, people go there to take selfies to say, I've been here, right? Yeah, who? And so what happened to them? Netflix. If you know the story, they have in MBA courses, they have a lot of case studies, conversations around it. But the skinny of it is Netflix was a young company, right? And they had this really great idea of sending movies to their customers or to ultimately stream online. And so Netflix was like, why don't we partner with a big company organization, Blockbusters? So they went up there and say, Blockbusters, hey, great. Listen, we have this great idea. A Blockbuster sat back and said, you're kind of young. You don't have as much time in the industry. No, I don't think so. And here's what they said. No one's ever going to want to stream movies online. People love coming into the store, looking for movies that are not there. Their kids being upset. Then you got to buy them cookies and sugar stuff. And now everyone in here probably has a favorite Netflix movie, right? So again, the work that we do around diversity, equity, inclusion should not just be a good thing to do. It should be a business case. And working with leaders of Fortune 500 companies, what we find is that diversity initiatives only go as far as the leaders believe in them. And when we do coaching with leaders, we always ask the question, if you got coaches in the room, any coaches in the room? We ask the question, what's keeping you up at night? And when they say when they talk about the challenges, it has to do with what we just talked about, right? Market share, mergers, all those other things. And if diversity, equity, and inclusion, not because they're not good people, not because they don't want to be inclusive, but if it's not a part of the bottom line, then why are we talking about it? It's because it's the right thing to do. Well, then it goes in this category over here. And the goal is to bring it into the category is, yes, it's the right thing to do, but also it's a business objective. And it's what's going to keep our business alive for the next 10, 20, 15 years and beyond. Okay, but in order to really understand this, we got to talk about the brain science, right? So that's the why, but here's the how. So when we think about this word bias, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Just yell it out. Bias. Perception. Give me a couple more. Opinion. Prejudice. Anything else? Judgment. Nepotism. All those things are true. Now, here's what I noticed, that in the States and abroad, we have a bias against bias. Because we don't think of it as something that's positive. It's not like if I said, hey, Mike, you're a biased guy. You're like, thank you, CJ, right back at you. But nothing can be further than the truth. Bias is neither good nor bad. Here's the definition that we use for bias in our company. Bias is a function of the brain that allows humans to decide quickly, primarily on safety against physical and emotional harm or discomfort. Your brain does not know the difference between this, right? Some people are not affected by snakes, but me, I am. So when I went to Sedona, I was looking around because there are lots of snakes there. And if you're driving in a car and all of a sudden someone slams on the brake, that's not you figuring it out, it's bias, right? And it's there to do one thing, to keep you safe. And also it doesn't know the difference between a physical or emotional harm or discomfort, right? So whether it's you're driving in a car and all of a sudden you have to slam on the brakes, or you're working with someone or a leader, or you're having a meeting with someone who you feel uncomfortable emotionally about, right? Your brain doesn't know the difference. It's not a good or a bad thing. Every single person in this room has bias, and you want to have bias because it is there to protect you. When we were a hunter and gatherer society, bias was there to make sure that when we went to go get dinner, we didn't become dinner. And it also made sure that when we had a bad experience, we didn't repeat that bad experience. But the problem is sometimes we have bad experiences with people and we categorize those people. So the goal here is to really be aware of what's happening behind the scenes. Okay, so quick activity here. So I want you to think back pre-COVID. Remember those days when didn't have to worry about a mask, or you didn't have to worry about vaccines or any of those things? You can get on a plane, sit wherever you wanted to sit. So I'm going to take you back. So I want you to imagine that you're flying Southwest. Anybody ever flown Southwest? You don't have a seat designation. You can get anywhere, and it's all about getting first in line, getting up early in the morning, making sure you hit the button. So I want you to imagine that you're on Southwest, you're going to get your seat, and you are C48. Yeah, so those people who know Southwest, that means you're like last in line, and you're sweating because you got it's like a relay race. You got to get ready to try to get your seat. Now, and we're going to do this as a group. I want you to be honest with me. What biases do you use to decide who you're going to sit next to on the flight? So instead of it being empty, there's every other seat has a person who's different than you in some way, some form, some fashion, from sexual orientation, skin color, height, background, language, anything you can imagine, right? So you're on this plane, and in Malcolm Gladwell's book, Blank, he tells us in seconds, the brain creates the stories about others primarily for safety. What bias do you use to decide who you're going to sit next to? What you got? Size. Hygiene. Who said that? Hygiene, yeah. But the question is, what does a person look like who may not smell good? We'll get back to that. What else? Age. Rotary doesn't like babies? Love babies, but not other people's babies on an airplane. So here's what happens. The brain, without your intention, awareness, or control, creates an algorithm based on your background, your past experiences, without you being aware of it. And it says, here's the priority list. Keep us away from anything that's going to make us feel uncomfortable or physically feel uncomfortable. So if it's babies on a plane, exit this way, right? And the brain creates a story based on your level of discomfort. So you said babies. Have you ever been on a plane with a baby? Check. Yes. Have you ever been? What was from a scale of 0 to 10? What was the discomfort level you've had? What was your number? A 7? A 10? Oh, wow. That baby must have did some things to you, right? So here's the thing. Anything past a 7.5, your brain remembers it and stores it away and says, we will never have that happen to us again. Have you ever hired someone for your business or organization as a leader and it was the wrong person, but it was after the 90 days? And you're like, darn. Guess what? Your brain is saying, don't worry about it. We'll never hire someone who looks like that, who talks like that, who's from that school, who's that height, that size, with those shoes. I mean, all types of stuff I've heard. I had one lady at Toyota said she doesn't hire a person who has a larger gap in between their neck and their collar. I think she was like so many meters. She was an engineer. She was very technical. And I said, well, what does that mean? She says, my story is that if you have a gap in that means you didn't pay attention. And we need people to pay attention because we build cars for the whole thing. So your brain does that. Again, without intention, awareness, or control. And your brain does it in a matter of milliseconds. So there's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize winner. He says that in our brains, we have two systems. We have the fast brain and the slow brain. The fast brain is where all our knee-jerk reactions live, our stories about kids, our stories about employees, our stories about people who may be similar or not similar to us. And our brain uses, I won't go through the different components here, but the most important part is the hypothalamus. It's the hippocampus. Hippocampus is the part of the brain that recalls all of the information, all of the things that ever happened to you when you were a kid, right? So you remember that time when you were on the playground and that person wouldn't pay, your brain actually stores that information. I had CEOs, Fortune 500 companies, remember the first time that they were excluded, and it was always on the playground in like kindergarten or first grade. That's always was the case. So your brain recalls all that information. And then there is the hypothalamus that produces the fight, flight, or freeze response. So when you're in a situation where you feel uncomfortable, you may get nervous, you may start to sweat, you may start to speed up your rate of speech, or you may ignore things and not really be intentional. This is what happens without your intention, awareness, and control. So what we want to do is figure out how to move from our fast brain, where all these knee-jerk reactions and responses, to our slow brain. Our slow brain is what engages the neocortex, which allows us to think about our thinking, which is what we call being aware of what's actually happening. Now, unfortunately, we do an assessment, which we won't do today, and we ask people, how often do you operate in the fast brain? Over 50% of people normally answer 50 to 75% of the time they are in fast brain, which means they're not in control of their current awareness of what they're doing in the moment. Which means that when we say innovate, we keep producing the same things because I have a certain background and I'm not looking at it from different perspectives. And this is why I want to get the same product. And eventually people are going to get tired of the same product, service, or face at the C-suite level of my organization. And they're going to go somewhere else and they're going to go to my competition. And so the goal is to be aware of when that happens. Now, how often would you say you're in fast brain? Based on what we just talked about. Like, so you're in fast brain when you're doing activities that you do on a consistent basis, like answering emails, talking to your spouse, anything like that, right? So all the things that you do in a given day on a Wednesday, how often would you say you're in this fast brain? Again, also when you have time restraint, when you're up against a challenge, we're more likely to be in fast brain, because in the fast brain, our brains have built these neural pathways that allow us to do the same thing over and over again to save time, so that we can also save ourselves and we don't become dinner, because that part of the brain, the reptilian part of the brain, is still operating. So in general, how often would you say you're in a fast brain? Okay, that's about right. All right, so because of time, I'm gonna skip past the video and just say, I know you want to see it, I'll send it to you. So the goal here of this video is to say that we are missing something. Every single person here is missing something when it comes to bias. And the brain does that on purpose. The average person is exposed to 11 million pieces of information at any one given time. And the brain, without your intention, awareness, or control, filters that information based on past experiences and you only absorb 40 to 50 pieces of information. Well, that's just not good enough because your brain says that's way too much information. What happens when you are overloaded with information? You freeze, right? And remember, your brain doesn't want you to be lunch. So make sure you're not lunch. Your brain says, here's what you need to do. So you're only actually aware of 5 to 7 pieces of information at any one given time. Has anybody ever been looking for their glasses and they're on their head? Been looking for the keys and then you're in pocket? Looking for your kids and they're in the car? All right, maybe that's just me. Okay, so the point is, we say that, Mike talked about the book, What's Your Zip Code Story, really says that what do we do about this? We have to expand our background, our experiences, our culture around people, places, and things. People, places, and things. Go new places, do new things with different people. That is the whole goal. And so how do we do that? The strategy is to recognize and accept that you have bias, right? So unless you're, if you're here and you're live, you have bias. If you're here and you're not breathing, then you have another problem. So every single person has bias. And sometimes those biases are politically incorrect. Well, we need to create safe spaces to have conversations because my biases come from my background. I can't change my background where I grew up, but I can change my experiences here right now. So there's this concept called bridging and bonding. Basically says that we bond with people who are similar to us because when the brain sees same, it sees safe. Oh, you're like me. You have 2.5 kids and a dog. I have 2.5 kids and a dog. You went to Penn, I went to Penn. The brain goes, awesome. And you actually get a dopamine shot when you have those experiences with people, right? So your brain is actually cooking up a chemical cocktail that says, I like this person. But the opposite is true when we're brokering relationships. We call this bridging. When you're bridging, it's the person that you see that maybe makes you feel uncomfortable. Or you don't have you ever had to ride in the car with someone and you didn't have anything to talk about? You're like, It's really uncomfortable. Your brain says never again. And so the goal is to really look at who you bond with. Great, awesome, keep doing that. But who do you bridge with? Who do you need to build relationships across differences with, right? And ultimately, in closing, Brene Brown talks about this a lot. Empathy is a superpower. And I believe this is true for all leaders. And this is what we have to do to really be inclusive. We have to be able to empathize for people who are not like us, who have a different experience than us, or people who agree with us, but also understand that diversity work does not happen overnight. I always tell people that, imagine a steamliner in the ocean. It does not turn on a dime. It takes roughly 2 miles for that shift to happen. And in organizations, as we do this new work and this new way of being, we want to create safe spaces for people who, need more time. We want to create safe spaces for people who are ready to do everything now. And we want to create safe spaces for conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, because remember, it's not just the right thing to do, it's the thing to do to keep our business alive. Now, here's the reality. This is not easy, okay? If everyone was to do everything that they know they were supposed to do, we all have our goals met, right? But the reality is, how often should we go to the gym? On average, what did they say? It's how many days a week? 3. See, we all know that. How many minutes a day? 30. Oh, that's high end. Okay, let's go with 30. We know it, but if we all knew it, we would do it. I'm not going to ask the next question, how often do we do it? So, Q&A. What questions do you have around what we just talked about, whether it's in our organizations, our communities, education systems, experiences, brain science, good joke, what do you have?
Based on people that we have much in common with. So think in addressing bias, you've got similar but different challenges. They are individually acquired biases versus culturally or community acquired biases. That a valuable way to look at that?
So great question. So the question is, if we have individual biases, is it more challenging if we have cultural biases? Correct? Is that right? So here's an example of what that might look like. And give me a thumbs up if I'm spot on here. So if we're an organization and all of the organization, this is the way we think, this is the way we do things. So we continue to do those things. And as an individual, how do we break away from that to develop a new way of thinking if the culture supports this? Okay, awesome. Right. Great question. So it starts with leadership. So in our organization, we focus on leaders. Leaders set the tone for the culture in the organization, and the culture of the organization is what drives the organizational goals. And so this is true. We then need to create organizational opportunities for people to expand their what we call the zip code story around people, places, and things. So a lot of this is operationalized, right? So it doesn't just happen because we should do it and maybe we'll just keep doing. I had one company, one of the largest construction management companies, and 83% of their C-suite level, and most of their company came from only 3 engineering schools. And so they said, well, we're looking for more women and more people of color to fill these positions, and it's hard to find. And I said, so what schools are you looking at? And they had these top 3 schools. And I said, well, look at the numbers here. All the people are coming from the same place. They're going to be the same. And they looked right at me with a serious face, and they said, so you're saying we should double down on those 3 schools? These are engineers. I checked. We don't know what we don't know unless the opportunity is created for us to do something different, to be something different, right? So if you put something in motion, we will continuously produce what we've always produced unless something changes, right? And so it sometimes requires consultants to come in and to support creating the shifts with leadership first, because leadership changes the culture. And if you're into sports, you're familiar with, there are certain schools, colleges that you go to, they always produce high-level players. There's a reason.
Thank you. I don't know if it's a question or a comment. Just respecting the fact that the story talked about what you were just saying as far as culture. So that you share with the young person who hears an idea. Knowing this audience and being an active community, what tips can you give to leadership to co-create that culture? Because there's a level of you to be, and I would put a third B on them, about bridging and bonding. There's a sense of belonging that needs to occur for that trust to manifest.
You're doing a workshop right now. So it was a big question. So the goal is the question was, what can leaders do to create belonging? Can I simplify it? Okay, awesome. So in this whole work of diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, justice, all those other things, but belonging is that one thing that's like, how do you get to that? Belonging, to just so you would be familiar, belonging is when you come to a family member's house and you can go in the refrigerator, open their doors, and it's all, you feel like you belong. But when there's a lack of belonging, you're not sure. You're not sure of the rules, what's accepted, what's not accepted. And when people don't feel like they belong, they leave. They leave companies, organizations, associations. So how do we create that? It's one thing that I've experienced at Rotary thus far is people coming up to me and just say, hey, you want to have lunch? You want to have a coffee conversation? And I say yes, because I always like to get free food. So, no, I'm joking. But the point is, that is the first thing. And then leaning into your zip code story. Like, so how did you come to Rotary? What's your experience? And to be honest, if there's something that's different, if it leads to maybe something that's uncomfortable, lean into it as a leader. Because when you create a psychological safety, people feel like it's comfortable to share the challenges of the differences. Because in the work that we do in organizational development, there is the concept of forming, storming, norming, and then performing. We want to skip past the challenging part, but we can't get to performing until we get to storming. And really, when it comes to specifically race and some gender things, some sexual orientation things, it becomes a little uncomfortable. But the best leaders lean into it. They lean into the conversation and they create psychological safety so that people can feel belonging, even when you're what we call the only. You may be the only male, the only woman, the only person with this identity. When you become the only, but yet you're still included to the level of belonging, then you've reached the gold star, the gold standard. We'll have one more? Okay. I'm always looking at Jackie, wrap it up. But we got some time. Okay, what other questions, comments, concerns, ideas? Yes.
Let's assume that there are some best practices out there Who's doing good work out there?
Okay. Okay. So there are two companies I worked with. One was Turner Construction. Now I'm talking about as a company. I'm not talking about individuals. Individuals are doing great work, but as a company, Turner Construction was one of them. They did fabulous work. One of their competitors, I won't mention their name because they weren't doing great work. And they were the ones that were having the challenge, right? So when the George Floyd situation happened, a lot of companies were like, oh, we need to put something up that Black Lives Matter. And then we were like, oh, all lives matter, blue lives matter. All these things were happening. And so I was getting on calls and, I don't think people were liking what I had to say. I pretty much said, why make a statement if you're not going to make a systems change? I prefer a lot of energy from me. I love it. I love it. I'm going to invite you to all my workshops. But if you're not going to do a systems change, I prefer you to do nothing. Because what happens in companies and organizations of people who are maybe feeling excluded or marginalized, if you put a banner up and says, I support Black Lives Matter, I support all lives matter, whatever it is, but yet nothing changes in the company. It's like you have that parent that tells you, like when you go to church, they do all the right things and at home, they're not. No, some people laughing, but that's kind of what happens. And let me pause for a moment. I just went way out. Did I even answer the question there? Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that companies are doing, and this is the challenging part, right? Because equity means giving up power. Equity means giving up resources. So what that means is you have to hire more diverse mindset people who have a diverse mindset. Now, the challenge is there are people in companies or organizations that have been there for the last 30 years. And in that, they've done great work, right? And innovation comes along, and now the innovation that we're doing now is totally different than innovation we've done in the last 15, 20, 30 years. So people are challenged because you have people who are sitting in that position and saying, hey, diversity means my job is at jeopardy. So the companies who are doing it well, I would say three things that they're doing. They are leveraging equity, the biggest equity of all, which is mentorship, which, Aaron, there's a plug for you. I wrote a whole chapter about mentorship in the book. I'm standing before you because of mentorship. Mentorship is one of the greatest equity components within companies, organizations, communities, education systems, because what it does is it leverages the playing field. Because as you go through different environments, you need to understand the rules. You need someone to speak up for you in conversations. You need someone to sponsor you. You need someone to open the door for you and opportunities present themselves. So I would say mentorship is the biggest thing. Next is bringing in consultants to have difficult conversations. Right. I won't go into it, but we've had a lot of live conversations where one person has the total opposite opinion of someone else and they're in leadership. Everyone goes, what are you going to do? That's when it's necessary for a skilled consultant to come in and to share their experiences and backgrounds and to leverage the playing field. So everyone, I can't stress this enough. So everyone in a company or organization feel a sense of belonging and feel included, and they can share their opinion. And guess what? They don't have to agree. That's, I think, a myth. Everyone has to agree. We have to all hold hands and say, no, that's not it. It's actually better when you don't agree, because that's how innovation happens. So leaning into discomfort. Okay, and I think that's it.
Wow, CJ, that was absolutely fabulous. Thank you so much. Great examples. And you know what I love is that with your engineering background, with your organizational management background, you really can identify issues. You can really work through processes and solutions. So it can be a working plan and change really can take place. So thank you for what you do. I truly encourage you to read CJ's book, What's Your Zip Code Story? Understanding and Overcoming Class Bias in the Workplace. And today, in honor of his presentation, he has signed the book plate of the book Epic Athletes, Simone Biles by Dan Wetzel, which we will donate to the York Academy Regional Charter School. Next week, Cadorus Valley Bancorp, Inc. is the parent company of People's Bank, the largest financial institution based in York. Our speaker will be Craig Kaufman, President and Chief Executive Officer, who assumed his responsibilities in October of 2021. He served before that as Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Codorus Valley from 2018 to 2021, and as a member of the board since 2019. Prior to joining Codorus Valley, he served as Regional President of Pennsylvania at BB&T. He plans to review the progress of People's Bank, the markets it serves, and several of the initiatives underway at the company. In closing today, our quote is by Matshona Deliweo: "A garden's beauty never lies in one flower." I hope you have a fabulous remainder of your week. This meeting is adjourned.